Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it up, babe. Tonight, we gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we gonna light it up.
Hopefully you guys can hear me. Welcome to the HVAC Guide live show where we talk about all things HVAC that no one else is talking about. As you can tell, I'm not in my normal studio. We are in North Carolina I'm attending a class down here, and I'm having some technical difficulties, just trying to get all this stuff straight. But just getting started here and getting all the bugs worked out, if you will. If you don't mind, say hello. Where are you in the country? And love seeing that. Let's say hello to some of the folks in the chat already. Good to see you, Gary, as always. Let me know how I sound. Again, this is not my normal setup. I'm not in my studio, so I'm using a portable mic, portable camera setup. So let me know how I sound. Good to see Ron. We're actually at his location. He's one of the top HVAC businesses in the state, and we are at his facility doing today's class. So good to see Ron. I'm not even going to try to say your name. I'll say Mr. T or Mrs. T. Let me know what to call you. But thank you for joining us. SFL, again, good to see you. Horace, better late than never. Amen to that. We're here. Horace is actually my roomie today at the class. We drug my RV down here, and so it's been an experience so far. Ryan, as always, good to see you. That's the first time I saw my question in the trailer. Haha, that's funny. I think I know what you're talking about, the intro there. So Ron says, don't blame North Carolina. Canada, Toronto in the house. Good to see you folks. I am at the Outer Banks. So Kill Devil Hills, I think, is the town we're in. So it's kind of near Kitty Hawk, but it's kind of in the middle, I think. I don't really know. It's in the Outer Banks. But yeah, we used to vacation down here, so it always feels like a vacation, even if I'm down here for work. We can see you fine. Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. So Steve says, are you in Charlotte? I am not. I'm far from Charlotte. In fact, the guy that is teaching today's class, he's from Daikin. As you guys know, Daikin is the brand we sold at my heating and air company, and they're one of the sponsors of our YouTube channel. And it's a Daikin class that I'm attending, and he lives near Charlotte. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, so I was putting today's show together, tonight's show. I was putting it together today, and I was going through some different articles and stories and what's going on lately in the heating and air industry. And I said, there is so many things. As I was sitting in this class, I said, there's so many things that homeowners are facing when it comes to ductless products. There are a lot of things, issues, if you will, that are not talked about enough, I don't think. And so that's why I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight. Feel free to drop a question. We don't have to talk about that particular subject. If you've got something you are dealing with specifically, or if there's something you want to know, I can't promise I'll know the answers, but we are sometimes joined in the chat with folks that do. But yeah, there's so many things going on from the, as far as ductless products go. And as I was sitting in this class, I'm sitting with some of the best HVAC technicians. We were not just sitting with the entire company. We were sitting with the service folks and the folks that fix these things, and hearing some of the questions they had as we were sitting in this class. And I said, there are lots of things that homeowners just simply don't know about these things. And some of them are not their fault. They're some things are self-inflicted, right? We have some of that, but there are a lot of things that are kind of outside of our control. And I wanted to cover some of those things tonight when it comes to ductless products. SFL says, what's new on the market? Well, there's lots of stuff coming. I know the Altherma, if you haven't seen that product, is launching in September, among other things. But I think a lot of the manufacturers, if you didn't see my video that launched this week, or was it last week, where we talked about the shortage of 454B refrigerant, that's playing a big role in the industry right now. I think, especially when we're talking about new products, I would bet that there are products that we didn't even know were going to be launched by some of the top brands in the industry, and that shortage alone is affecting that. So I bet there's some scrambling going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. We'll see. But yeah, so Daikin doesn't have to worry about any of that, right? Daikin, Amana, Goodman, they went R32, and they've got all kinds of cool stuff, new stuff that's coming. And I always tread lightly with that, because I don't know what I'm allowed to share and what I'm not until you guys. Ryan is always famous for saying, well, what about this product? And I'm like, oh, great, we can talk about that now because you guys know about it, right? So that's kind of cool. But yeah, I think just getting started on that subject, at least until we get some questions rolling in. I know last week you guys really got rolling, but I just want to maybe just say that one of the biggest issues I see right now with ductless products specifically, and they touched on it in today's class, and that is a lot of people look at inverter products and ductless products specifically as, because it has the capability of ramping down to save energy, that they'll look at that as, well, the product has the capability of ramping down, so of course I can oversize it for the space that it's going to be. We can install it can ramp down, right? So magically it will ramp down and run longer and remove more humidity and technically not be oversized for that space. And that is a huge issue, because not only do some homeowners think that, but unfortunately we have some pros in our industry that seem to think that, and it's just simply not the case. It's not the way the products work. Now, is there some of that, right? Well, sure. That's the whole deal of sizing it properly so that it's sized for extreme temperatures. It's sized for that hot July, late in the afternoon, blazing hot temperatures. Yeah, it's sized for that. But then, oh yeah, by the way, it's still running as optimally. Is that the word? Optimally? It's running to its, best of its abilities, even on a mild day. It's able to ramp down and still do its thing. And so some people will use that capability to say, oh, well, I'll just install this system in a bedroom, right? They'll take a mini split and they'll put one in each bedroom, and they end up taking a home that, if you did a complete load calculation on that home, maybe only needs, 2 tons of cooling. But after you start adding all the heads up, and then they do a multi-zone, so now you've got to have an outdoor unit that can handle all of these indoor units, and now that adds to the capacity of the system. And now you end up taking a home that really should only have 2 tons, or maybe even less than that, right? We would have put a 2 ton in there, but if you actually read the load calculations, maybe it really only needs 2,000 BTUs, but we would go 2 ton because that's the next size up. And then you end up at the end of the road here after all these heads are installed and all these, you know, outdoor units that can have the ability to work with all of these indoor units. Now you've got this very, very oversized system that just simply cannot physically ramp down far enough. And then you go back to some of the videos that I made when I first started this YouTube channel of load calculations and how systems can be oversized and all the problems that presents. And now you see those same exact problems, even with some of the best technologies on the market. So I think that's one thing that we'll just go ahead and get out of the way as we go down the rabbit hole, as if we go down a rabbit hole tonight, if you will. Ryan says, sometimes my mini split wall mount unit makes whiny noises that are low pitched, but I can hear the frequency. Also, it can smell at times, but I have the blower fan continue after turning off to dry it. Interesting. Ron says, I'll sell you a new one. I remember one specific brand years ago that, I lost my, don't go anywhere, folks. My camera just went haywire here, but bear with me. I don't know why it's doing that. Hold on. I don't know why it did that. Bear with me here, folks. Okay. Why does it keep doing that? Looks like your camera was unplugged. Yeah, no kidding. Why is this not working? Okay, sorry, folks. I remember there was this particular brand years ago that they even said out of the box that it was an inverter system. It was one of the non-communicating inverter systems. And they would say, we know that folks with hearing aids can sometimes hear whatever frequency it picks up, that it will be bothersome to folks with hearing aids with this particular brand. And if they do hear that, then just flip this dip switch. It'll affect the overall operation of that system. And you know, maybe it would, instead of running at 100%, you know, frequency, maybe it only run at 85 or something. I don't know, but they literally had a dip switch for that. So that's interesting that you mentioned that, Ryan. Emery says, what else can cause an evaporator coil to freeze up besides dirty filters or undersized ducts? Well, so I think you're right. You're right in the right ballpark right there, right? So if you've got a system that the coil is freezing up, there's probably lots of things that could cause it, but the two main ones typically are going to be low airflow and low refrigerant, usually, right? And so when you start talking about dirty filters, undersized ductwork, obviously we're affecting the airflow there. And so that could cause it. Obviously, that's where I would start first, is with low refrigerant and low. I'm going to start airflow first, dial that in, make sure all that's good. And then I'm going to look at the refrigerant, make sure that's right. And then if both of those are dialed in and I still have something freezing up, we can start looking at other things like metering devices and, you know, refrigerant flow and restrictions and so on. But those are the main things that I'm going to want to look at first. Those are the common. Come on, why is this thing doing this? Okay, so it says my camera is overheating. That's why it keeps shutting off. So I'm not sure why it's overheating, guys, but it does feel warm. That's never happened to me before, but let me try. Bear with me here. I'm going to switch cameras to the horrible one on my laptop. So give me just a moment here. See if you guys can see me there. Is it going to work? Bear with me. Bear with me, folks. Camera. What's that? Oh. No, it doesn't feel hot. So I don't know what the deal is there. It's really not that hot in here, but it's warm, but it ain't hot. So I don't know what the deal is with that. But the show must go on, my friend. I don't know. Hold on, folks. So sorry. I don't know. Here we go. This should fix it. Nope, not fixing it either. All right, guys, give me just this moment. I'm gonna restart my computer, I guess, because I'm trying to flip to a different camera here, and it is not working. Well, is this one gonna work now? Oh, now that one works. No, it doesn't. I swear. Let's see. What else can evaporator coil do to freeze up? Okay, yep. No need for a new one. I just want the year-old one I have to work better. Have your contractor look at that, Ryan. There actually might be some things that they can do to to make it run better. They're never going to make it run completely quiet, but if I remember correctly, you've got the Atmosphere, so they should be able to dial that in a little better. You never heard of or experienced whiny sounds from mini split indoor units. So when you say whiny sounds, I'm going to lean in three different directions. The first one is refrigerant. If there is a circulation of the refrigerant issue, that's something that we can look at. If it's a motor, so the actual indoor fan motor in there, I might look at that. Make sure that there isn't something off tilt. Make sure that the motor itself isn't creating any sounds itself. And then finally, the louvers also have a little motor in there, if you will, and maybe that's what you're hearing. So can you use your phone camera? Maybe. The problem is, so I use Chrome browser. Anyway, we're getting off topic, but when I have to tell the settings which camera I want to use before I use my StreamYard software. And then when I try to switch between them, sometimes I have to restart my computer for some weird reason. So I've considered switching softwares multiple times, but there's things that I really like about this one, and that's why I haven't switched yet. But anyway, it never fails. It wouldn't be our show unless we had a few issues, right? SFL says my AC will run nice and cool, and then the heat comes on. You got me on that one. I'm gonna give it to you. Bear with me here. I'm gonna pull up my notes from. I had written a couple notes on this whole ductless topic earlier today as well. Where did that go? Let's see. Yeah, we talked about the capacity issue. And I think another thing that I talked about this in another video that I, again, don't think is talked about enough. And that is, I don't think enough homeowners take the time to learn all the capabilities that their system has. So like you take a product like the Atmosphere, for example, it's not the same run-of-the-mill mini split that you can buy on Amazon, right? It's the cat's meow. It's got features in there that your average mini split just simply doesn't have. And I think a lot of homeowners would do themselves a lot of service if they would just read and you guys get, this is a hot topic. Some of you guys will have even said in our chat before, well, I shouldn't have to do that. My heating and air guy, when he installed it, he should have told me all of this stuff. And I think we can agree on that, but he didn't. And so now what are we going to do about it? And so just, I think, read the capabilities of that remote control, understand what each button actually does. And you might be surprised that there are things that your system can do that would, blow your mind. One just feature that just kind of comes to mind as I think about some of the features that some of these different systems have is some of them can run a schedule. Some of them have the ability to, run at high capacity, or some of them have the ability to, run at a very low, auto is where I always tell folks to at least set their fan, set it to auto. But another thing that, we were talking about in today's class is some of these systems have a much larger temperature swing on their auto changeover in comparison to a lot of conventional systems that are out there. And that temperature swing, there's a number of reasons they have such a large swing on that, but just knowing what that swing is and why you may or may not want to even use auto changeover on a mini split because of it. I heard it, I believe, said today during the class, but I've heard it from other folks over the years, and that is some heating and air pros will literally tell homeowners not to use the auto changeover. Do you use the auto changeover on yours, Ryan? Do you set it to where it'll do heat and cold, and you just set the temperature and it'll run in whatever mode? I just think that the swing on that, I don't think deadband is the right term to use in this context, but that swing between them, that range in temperature before it runs an AC or heat, that's something that a lot of folks, unless you read the manual or unless someone told you, you may not know about that large range. Colton says, Bosch mini splits are my favorite. Love the backwards compatibility. Awesome. Have you compared them to other mini splits? When you say they're your favorite, I'm just out of curiosity. Have you compared them to anything else, or has that just what you've always used and now they're your favorite and you're not going to try anything else? I think, as far as the capabilities of the system, another thing I know folks hate when we talk about this topic, but it is that time of year. And that is, a lot of folks face issues with their ductless systems because of maintenance. And they're not maintained as well as a lot of, unitary conventional systems in a lot of cases. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think some folks just simply don't maintain things maybe as well as they could. But I think I think it's also a lot of mini splits are thought of as, I only turn it on when I need it. It's not my primary source of heating or cooling. And I'm just not as concerned about making sure I stay on top of the, using the analogy of a car. I don't stay on top of the oil changes with that car because it sits in the garage more times than not. Right. But I think the other flip side of that coin, if we're just going to be blunt about it, is I think that mini splits are not maintained as well as they could be because a lot of pros, they just either don't like to do them, or maybe they just don't know how to do proper maintenances on them, because they can be, especially if you got one of those kits where you're kind of almost wrapping it around the unit. I don't know if you guys have seen those. I wonder if I can get a picture of that. Let's see, ductless maintenance. See if I can show you guys what I'm talking about here. Cleaning, how about that? Okay, yes, yeah, here we go. So let me share this one and then make my face a little smaller. But yeah, these kits, you see this guy, he's kind of got his sprayer out and he's got this, bib or you know, I don't even know what to call it. I think some brands do call it a bib, but it kind of wraps around there. I've seen some of them where it kind of wraps around the top of it as well. And then it's got this flap here, like this guy here. And I actually talked to a guy a few weeks ago. Well, maybe it's been a couple months now, but he was telling me how much they like this style better. Makes a better for messes, you know, and cleanup, and they like that style better. But anyway, you know, you're looking at doing it that way. That's probably the most common way if they're going to do it correctly. But you know, there are folks that will simply, you know, uninstall the unit to clean it, depending on how bad it is, you know. And then some folks won't do any of that. They'll just simply clean the coil, maybe the fan wheel if they can get to it, or pull just simply the fan wheel out, and then just kind of wipe everything else out and down. And maybe that's okay for systems that are not super, super dirty. But, you know, like this system here, or this, I mean, look at that. I mean, this one here, they've got this thing all foamed up and clean, you know, they're really getting in there. So, you know, I think that plays a big role in this. And of course, we're talking about wall hung mini splits right now, but there are many different types of heads. There are floor mounts and, you know, cassettes and all the different types of mini splits that are out there. And the question becomes, are those being maintained as well as they could be or should be, right? And I think that plays a big role in all of this. Gary says, auto cool heat not recommended for multi-zone head on a single OTU according to my Mitsubishi manual. Yeah, it's what a lot of the guys will say. They'll say, don't you really use that? And I'm not saying I don't disagree with them, but I do think there are times when I might say to a customer, if they're a customer of mine, hey, you can use that, but just understand this is how it operates, and kind of going through some of that, you know, educating them so they're not surprised at the poor performance or the large temperature swing, right? Yeah, so let me do this. If you're here, don't go anywhere. I'm just going to take just a moment and thank the sponsor of tonight's show. We'll be right back. Okay, hopefully that played okay. On my end, my video started lagging really bad. So Ryan, let me know if that video played okay. That's for the sponsor of tonight's show, Larry the Bear Marketing. I'm actually part owner of that business, and so we started a marketing company. We specialize in helping service-based businesses. And so that is the sponsor of tonight's show. I called it Larry the Bear because we were going to call it all these different adjectives, and I wanted bear to be in there because I think it's going to help with marketing. And I was like, you know, if we called it, you know, Giant Bear Marketing, no one will remember that. But if we name him Larry, then maybe that'll be a little more memorable. So yeah, so if you do own a service-based business or any other kind of business and you want marketing from someone that's actually done it, built a business up and sold it, then, you know, let us know. So, Fidel, good to see you, buddy. Fidel's a really good friend of mine. So good to see you. The video was good. Okay, good. On my end, it was lagging really bad. So I'll always go back and watch the show after, or at least watch stuff like that. So I'll do that again, but good stuff. Ryan says, I had to add 2 pounds of 410A to my system again in 4 years, waiting to see how the new systems are performing before picking a replacement. My current system is 20 years old, so not repairing. Wow, well, you got your money's worth out of it. So good for you. Let's see, 20 years ago, so that would have been 2005 2004 or 5, right? And so that's really interesting that they went with 410 back then, or you did, because folks could still get their hands on R22. I felt like R22. There was this big when we shifted to 410. There was this big overlap, right? So there were I remember Carrier. You could buy an R22 system way back in the early 90s. Those Puron systems. And then you could buy a 410A system all the way up, dry charged until 2016. So that was a really huge phased out, transfer of power from one refrigerant to the other. Whereas, as we're moving from 410 to these new refrigerants, I mean, we're now looking at a very, very, very short window of time there. And I felt like the mid 2000s was when folks, the company I worked at, that's when we were moving to 410 because R22 was starting to go up in price. And I don't remember the exact year, but somewhere around 2010, maybe a little sooner than that. Camera overheated again, apparently, but I'll just keep rolling until it cools down a little. But that overlap there, they somewhere around in that time frame is when they came out with the dry charged units. So I'm wanting to say 2010ish, maybe. It was about a handful of years there that we could buy dry charged R22 systems still. And what I think is interesting about that is all the way up until 2016, if we were still able to sell R22 systems dry charged that came with a 10-year warranty, that means there are still today, during this recording, or we're not recording, we're live, but during this moment, where there are still R22 systems out there, technically, that are still under warranty. I mean, how crazy is that? I would dare guess that there aren't many, but they're out there. If you were still installing R22 right up until that very end in 2016, then you really loved you some R22. And I have to admit, I remember still, even then, installing a few, even that very last year, knowing that this would be it, because there were still customers out there that's what they wanted. And little did we know a big change was coming, right? Ryan says, I'm the newest homeowner, not the original. So I didn't pick the system. It's an old Dave Lennox signature series that has an extremely probably quiet outdoor condenser. Nice. I get compliments on it from Tex. LOL. Okay, very cool. Well, I bet that system was the cat's meow back in the day. If it's, after all these years, if it's still receiving compliments and you got 20 years out of it, so there's that. There's still that, so good for you and good for them, right? I think Lennox really took one on the chin there, right? When they had that class action lawsuit on their coils leaking. And I think that they've rebounded probably. I know that there are heating and air techs in our industry that still respect them. We'll sometimes I'll see these debates on what the big three are in our industry. So, some folks will say the big three, Trane, Carrier, and Daikin, right? And then other guys will be like, no, it's not Daikin, it's Lennox is the third one. And then others will be like, no, Rheem is in there too. And so they've obviously bounced back a little bit from that standpoint, but you guys know this if you've seen any of my stuff before, and I'll just say it again. My biggest problem with Lennox, not to pick on Lennox, because I'm sure there are things that, Lennox pros could probably say, I like them because of this, this, and this. But my biggest personally problem with them is this whole thing where you can't look up your own warranty. You as a homeowner, if you buy a Linux system today and then 5 years goes by, unless they change something or have changed something that I'm not aware of, then you have to be a pro. You have to have an account to get into their whole system to even check your warranty. Whereas with many other brands, as long as you have your serial number and you know your own last name, right? Because sometimes that warranty may be attached to your name as well, because if you move from that home, the next homeowner may not get the full benefits or full length of that warranty. So your serial number, you go to their website, you put in their serial number and maybe the name of the homeowner. I know some brands, it's not attached to the homeowner's name, it's attached to the address itself, right? So however that works, but you just punch in a couple pieces of information and anybody, you, your technician, or me as a stranger could look up and see what the warranty coverage is left on that system. And I think the only thing with that is if you're not able to look up your own warranty and you don't have any documentation still from the day that you installed it, it does open the door for those folks that aren't honest and they say, oh, you're no longer under warranty, you need to pay full price, knowing good and well that that part is covered. And I've just never liked that. And now Linux isn't the only one, but Linux is the only one that is one of those top well-known brands that have been around a while in our country. There's plenty of other brands that are still that you still can't look up your warranty. And that's why part of the reason why on our website, newhvacguide.com, you scroll all the way to the bottom and you can click check my warranty. And most brands that are out there, you can click that link and you just put in your serial number with your brand and you can look up your own warranty. But again, there are brands out there, including Linux and a number of others, that you cannot. And so I'm not a fan of that. I'm just not. Anne-Marie says, why doesn't an oversized unit run long enough to remove humidity? Well, it's kind of like that question itself is sort of like what they call an oxymoron, right? A jumbo shrimp, because the reason it doesn't run long enough is because it's oversized. So just imagine if you had a hot summer day and you have a system that's meant to, if it's sized correctly, it should run for 10 minutes to reach temperature. And it ran for 10 minutes and it removed humidity that whole time. And it's dumping water out of the house. You got a nice cold coil that's below dew point and it's condensing and it's draining out and all the stuff that you want that system to do. And then you take that same system and you double the size of that system, and now it takes half of the amount of time. And now only takes 5 minutes, for example, to reach temperature. Well, it's just simply not going to run as long as it would have if it was sized for that space, if that makes sense. So, Train, Linux, Ream, and Carrier are my top picks. Ryan says... Oh, that was Emery that said that, by the way, not me. Let's be clear. Ryan says the evaporator coil on it was replaced twice from what I can see in my attic records. Oh, nice. So they kept good records. It's leaking again, but it's old. And so it's good to move on in the next year or two. So I've topped it off twice in the 5 years. Have you tried to repair the one that's there at all, Ryan? Have you tried any of those leak seal products? If the leak's not real big, you might be able to buy yourself a little more time, especially knowing that it's on its last leg. I know a lot of guys in our industry aren't a fan of those leak sealing products because some in the past, and maybe even today, have been known to cause problems themselves. But if you're just trying to buy a little more time, maybe that might be an option. Nervin's numbers. What's the average salary for HVAC? Well, I think that depends on where you live. And it depends on your experience. But I think most good technicians today, even, assuming you live in a state, because there's extremes, right? So we could say one extreme is really high cost of living, a state with You know, maybe they've got higher taxes, or they've got other, things that they've got they add to your cost of living, if you will. That's one extreme. And then there's the other side of that extreme, or, low taxes and low cost of living, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's somewhere in the middle. And I think most technicians, even if you're somewhere in the very, very middle, are, I'll just say it. I've got friends that have lots of letters behind their names. They've gone to a lot of schooling, and they have the same or maybe even lower salaries than some folks that are in blue collar industry. So I know that doesn't really answer your question. You said that you live down in Florida. So I don't know. I don't want to tell you wrong, because I don't know the exact salaries, but again, I've got, especially business owners, right? If you work your way up and then you start your own business, you can do very well for yourself in comparison to other careers that are out there. And heating and air is a little unique compared to other trades, because we're moving into a very unsafe era of our industry, if you will. Our industry's always had its safety issues, but as we move more into refrigerants that are flammable, that's going to perhaps make some folks more, valuable. Folks that are able to work on that stuff safely. Ryan says, the fact about Linux makes me uneasy about going with them. Plus, the contractors around here charge a huge premium to install it in Charlotte compared to other top brands like Daikin, Trane, and Carrier. Interesting. Emery says, how you recommend brands that are the same manufacturers like Reamrude, Trane, American Standard, Daikin, Amana, Goodman, etc. How you recommend brands? Are you asking how do I personally recommend them? I mean, I've always been transparent. I mean, that's part of the reason I have a YouTube channel. So to me, if you're looking at a Trane or an American Standard, as long as you understand that they're both the same product, in some cases, it's just a different sticker on there. A lot of times you just read the label, right? You can buy an Amana and read Daikin on the label. You can buy a Bryant and read Carrier on the label. So I think transparency is part of that. Knowing that sometimes you're just simply purchasing the name, right? But not always. I think that because of the internet, anybody that does any level of homework on what they're about to buy, it's not like it's completely hidden anyway. A lot of folks know that about our industry. It's just like we all know that General Motors makes all these other brands of cars too, right? So let's see. Ryan says, I will try the leak seal next time. Even the tech I used mentioned it, but he didn't have any on him. Got it. How do you recommend, or I'm sorry, how do you personally feel about financing HVAC systems versus paying cash for them? Do you lean one way or the other? Yes, I lean very, very, very much one way. I have done multiple videos on this topic because it's one of the problems with our industry, in my opinion. And that is, there are a lot of financing companies out there that have sunk their teeth into our industry. And it's part of the reason I don't have I have had financing companies approach us to sponsor our content on this channel. And I've said no, because if they have dealer fees that are then passed on to the customer, I actually don't even care about that. Let's be clear. Business is business. Capitalism, or whatever you want to say, fine. What I have a problem with is the transparency. I have a problem with a financing company telling a heating and air company that we're going to have these fees on you, but you can't tell the customer about these fees. You can't pass those fees on to the customer. In fact, there are states in our country that say you can't do that. So at the end of the day, to me, what is more, I don't know, dirty, scammy than a contractor trying to abide by those rules, and because of that, he has to build those fees into all of his pricing, including the customers that pay cash. So a customer pays cash, they're not even going to finance, but yet they still have to pay a portion of those dealer fees that scammy financing companies pass on to these heating and air companies. So yes, I feel very, very much one way versus the other. And so that's, and that this is the tip of the iceberg. We're not even talking about some of the other problems with this whole scenario, in that a lot of other industries that have financing, the salespeople, like if you go to Kohl's or I don't know, I think Target might have one. In my hometown where I grew up, there was this store called Belk, and you could go there and you could buy some. J.C. Penney had one, and you would go in there and you could buy some clothes, and as you're checking out, they would say, "Hey, by the way, I'm supposed to be talking about ductless issues tonight, guys. Y'all done got me down a rabbit hole here." But you go into these retail Bass Pro Shops. I've been in there, and they'll say, with today's purchase, if you get our credit card, we'll give you, X amount of dollars off. And I have personally had friends and family that worked at some of these retail places, and they would get spiffs. They would get commissions off getting people to sign up for their financing or credit card programs. So they're not losing money by offering those credit cards to people. They're making money off of that. And in fact, they're not just making money off of it. They're paying their employees a spiff for offering that to customers. But in our industry, seems like it's one of the only industries out there, we are penalized for trying to offer financing to a homeowner who's about to make a very, very large purchase. And it's not fair. I obviously have a very big problem with it. And, Ryan just brought up another argument that I hear, and that is that car dealerships have fees too. I got it. Maybe they shouldn't either. You can't tell me that these companies are losing money if they're able to offer spiffs to retail establishments to sell their financing products. Oh, Josh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about financing. You're right. I don't know anything about it, but it feels very dirty when we're not allowed to tell a homeowner that we're being charged a fee and we're going to pass that fee on to them. It just, y'all done got me fired up because it pisses me off about our industry. Out of all the things that we deal with in our industry, that is the one thing that they sink their teeth into our industry, because people are in a vulnerable time. Homeowners are vulnerable. They're about to make a big purchase. And then you've got these small heating and air companies. That's the other flip side of this. That's the difference. When you're talking about a Target, Bass Pro Shops, or Kohl's, they're large retail establishments. But if you're talking about Bobby's Heating and Air, who only has 3 employees, and he's got to figure out how he's going to make payroll next week, and he wants to offer financing at his company, then he needs to be able to sell this system somehow. He's got to take care. He's got mouths to feed, if you will, including his own family. And he's just trying to figure this out, and he's got to play by the rules. And I just think it's very unfair. But Ryan says, crazy that finance companies don't pay you for the leads like car dealerships and real estate companies get. That's strange. HVAC industry should fight back on this at some point. I actually don't disagree with that. I don't know how they could fight it. I think they've got other big fish to fry and other fights to fight. But I do, it's one of the biggest problems with our industry. And then, of course, you guys are going to love this, because any good YouTube channel is going to have a plug. But you can go to our website, newhvacguide.com, and we offer financing there. Yes, I make a little bit off of, it's a very little bit, but we get a little bit every time we offer, someone signs up for that. It's not the best rates in the world, but the one thing I can guarantee is no one's getting a hidden fee at the end. The HVAC contractor is not. So you can go to Bobby's Heating and Air and say, give me your best price. I'm going to get my finances elsewhere. I'm going to get my money elsewhere. So give me your best price. Don't put those fees on me. And then, so Bobby's not got to pay for it. And then you yourself don't have any extra hidden fees. But I don't care where you get financed, whether it's through our website, whether it's through a bank, or if it's through your heating and air company. I just think at the end of the day, just know what you're paying for up front. Do the math. If that's the other thing. There was a huge news story that came out last year where they took advantage of this 90-year-old man because they came in and the system should have only been, say, $12,000. But after they did the math with all the financing and all the fees, and the heating and air company was being grubby too, I think, and adding stuff in there, the guy ended up, after you did the math, it was like $30,000 for the same exact system if you added up all the payments over this time span. And yeah, I obviously feel very strongly. It's the one subject that I do get multiple videos I've made. I get very fired up about it because it's just a shame. And again, I'm sure I just don't know the whole story. I'm sure there's people that know way more about finance. You know, there might be someone that works at a financing company that could say, well, Josh, you just don't know the full story here. And maybe that's true, but it just does, it does get me a little fired up. I actually don't even care about the fees themselves. If you've got to charge them, then charge them. But don't tell me that I can't tell my customer about it. Don't tell a small heating and air company that they can't tell the hairy homeowner, hey, Harry, I'm very sorry, but there's this 9% dealer fee that they're imposing on me. And then unfortunately, I'm going to have to add that into the price here if you want to finance it through us. Oh, you can't do that. Why can't I? Why can't we have a little transparency here? That's when I have a huge problem with that, no doubt. Nervin says, how long do you think you should work at an HVAC company before you start your own company? Well, I don't know about your state, Nervins. Every state's different, but I think the answer to that would be you should be there at least long enough to get licensed and insured. So in my state, the absolute fastest way you can do it is if you go to a 2-year school that offers a degree in heating and air, and you get to the end of that 2 years, you can then sit for the journeyman's tests. And then once you get your journeyman's license, then a year later sit for the master's test. So the absolute fastest track to that would be 3 years. But the way my particular state does it is there's options there. So you can have a 2-year degree. You can have, I think it's like 5 or 4 years of work experience and some, 2 years or 3 years of schooling. And then you can have a little less of work experience with a little more schooling or something like that. It's something like that. And then, or you can have 10 years of experience in the trade of work experience with no schooling in that, and then just go ahead and sit for the master's test. So I know different states do it different ways, but I think that would be my answer to that question. I know there's been people that have done it. I remember a guy I talked to like a year ago, and he's like, yeah, I've actually only been in the trade for 5 years, but I've owned a business for 3 of those. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I decided I was a helper at a company. I just go start my own. What? You could never do that in Virginia and be licensed. So I just thought that was crazy. Ryan says, I've seen that those finance companies tell HVAC contractors, tell the customer it's just the price of doing business. There was a video on YouTube and they laughed about it. I did a video where they were laughing at me because I asked a question. There was this webinar with one of the top educational organizations that are out there that some of the top brands in our industry have partnered with. And they did a webinar where they had, I'm not going to mention any names, so I don't want to be getting sued, but there's a top financing company on there. And then they also had this lady from one of the, how do I say this without saying who she was? She has a program where technicians can buy their program and be able to offer options through that program to customers. And I remember asking them, I think I asked them something to the effect of, do you think it's right for, for financing companies to add these fees in on customers? And they all were laughing at me. And I've never forgotten that to this day. So, that lady will never have any part to do with anything I do. I can tell you that. She'll never sponsor this YouTube channel. And I think we've got some bigger and better things coming in this industry outside of this YouTube channel, and I will not do business with them. Yes, I'm that petty, because I won't deal with dirty people. You know, if you think it's laughable that the way these things are handled, you're just not the type of person I want to associate with. So it's not Asheray, John, if you were trying to guess who I was talking about. Ryan says, I have never used filter dryers for mini split systems. Are they needed? So I haven't either. I think we could all maybe make an argument on whether or not they should be used or could be used. But the biggest thing with that is, you know, your metering device is in your outdoor unit. And so because of that, the filter dryer would have to be located up in the unit somewhere, some way, somehow. So wouldn't it be great if we all could just install systems and we all flowed nitrogen and we all triple evacuated and we all didn't need a filter dryer at the end of the day, right? There's no contaminants in any air conditioner out there. But are they needed? No, because nobody does them. Would they be maybe great to have? Maybe, but again, you would have to mount it up inside the unit some way. Ryan says, mini splits are great. I'm thinking about adding another in my house, but I'm also thinking about using one of those inverter window units that are heat pumps like mini splits. I haven't really dove into those window units that are inverters, but I wonder what the capacity limitations are. I know with the old school systems, you know, if you started getting up above 12,000 BTUs, the units would get quite large, right? You needed to have a sizable window. And then you would also, at some point, as you went up in size, you would have to go to a 220 or 240 volt circuit instead of 120, you know. I think I know the company that you were referencing. Does it start with the letter S? Let's see. No, none of the three companies I was talking about start with S. So yeah, you guys aren't gonna. I'm not telling y'all who they are, folks. Looks like we do have a couple more last minute questions. I do want to say thank you to everybody. We've had a few videos lately do very well, and I just want to say thank you to all of you for your support. If you don't mind hitting the like button on tonight's show, I would very much appreciate that. But I do want to do one last thing as we answer these questions, these last few questions, and that is, if you know a good apple in our industry, right? We all know there's some bad ones. We all know that there are heating and air companies, and we've referenced some financing companies and so on in our industry that make us all look bad. If you know any good heating and air, electrical, or plumbing companies that are doing good things and they're a good apple, please drop their name of that company in the chat and where they're located. Let's show them some love. And you never know, someone in your area may see your message and you might be able to send them some business too. So please do that, and we'll put them up right down here, those companies on the screen. Let's see. Emery says, what is the purpose of the filter dryer in the liquid line? Well, it's supposed to remove some of the moisture. It's also supposed to remove some of the particulates and so on that are flowing through. It's supposed to clean the refrigerant a little bit. I think it has its limitations. It can't do but so much, but that's why it's there. Any thoughts on geothermal for the average home? They're efficient. They're great, but they're also expensive. So that's my thoughts on that in a nutshell. You know, Cap'n Jack, welcome to the show. Had our 5 installers sign both top of the line carrier furnaces and AC units after the install yesterday. Signed both. Such pride in their work. Amazing work. Have you ever done that? Have I signed it? Well, I don't know about sign it, but on every installation my company ever did, we would always put a sticker on there that said, if you have any problems with this, make sure you call us. And then the other thing we always try to do to make it easy on folks to, if they're looking up their warranty, is we would always write installed on and then whatever the date was. I had a plumber that actually taught me that with a water heater. When I first got in this trade, got into the trades, he would write installed on this date on all the water heaters that he installed. So that way folks knew immediately what their warranty was. If it had a 10-year or 6-year warranty on that tank, they could just simply look at that date and know what their warranty coverage was. John says Nunez. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. So shout out to those folks in Windsor, Connecticut. Good to see that. Armstrong Comfort Solutions in Pittsburgh. Shout out to those folks if you're in the Pittsburgh area. Picasso stuff. Okay. We have the service sticker too, but having their signs is so cool. Thanks for answering. Awesome. Thank you. Well, good enough. We're going to go ahead and wrap up in just a moment here, guys. But again, if you don't mind hitting that like button, if you're not subscribed to our channel, we are one of the top HVAC channels for the latest news. We try to stay on top of all of that. So if you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that bell notification so you see this fat face pop up whenever something new comes out. But other than that, this was being not in my studio. This has been a little tough with the camera shutting off and stuff, obviously. Ryan says Priest Heating and Cooling in Erie, Pennsylvania. So shout out to Priest. But yeah, it's just been a lot of fun, and we've had really good numbers tonight too. We were almost to 30 folks joining us at one point, and it's been a lot of fun tonight. So I will be back in my studio next Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you're there. We're gonna have I've got some guests lined up. I don't know if there will be one next week, but we've got some coming. And not just any guests, but some of the top voices in our industry, some of the top influencing voices, making waves and educating folks and so on in our industry. So a lot of cool stuff coming. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, make it a great week. Take care.